application called Button Stuff 2. Actually made Button Stuff in class and didn't record it. We're going to learn how to enable and disable buttons in Visual Basic. We'll also take a look at some border styles of labels as well as the flat style of buttons towards the end of this presentation. The form is going to need to be a lot larger than what we are originally given, so I'll resize it here. And I'll change the text of this form. I'll call it Button Stuff 2 to match the application name I gave to this project. Next, we're going to need 3 buttons. So I'll get 3 buttons out of the toolbox. By default, their names and text are Button 1, Button 2, and Button 3. We'll address those in a little bit. Right now, I'm going to resize these buttons to make them larger. Notice that we can select all 3 at one time and resize all 3 at the same time, and also going to change the font. Make it a little easier to read by enlarging the text inside. We're going to need a label also in this program, so I'll grab one of those and put it over on the right-hand side of this form. By default, its name and text is label 1. I'm going to change the auto size property to false and then resize this label. Notice that the alignment of the text by default is in the upper left corner or top left. If we head down to the, I guess I'm going to change the font next and make it larger. Then take care of text align, and we'll put that right in the middle center. Now let's deal with the buttons. This first button is going to be called BTN Enable. And its text property will be Enable the green button. You'll see its purpose in a moment when I turn button 2 into the green button. I'm going to go to button 3 now, change its name to BTN Disable. And I'll change its text to Disable the green button. As you may have guessed, our remaining button will become the green button, and I'll call it BTN Green. And we'll give it some text to indicate it is, in fact, the green button. We'll change some colors so it actually appears to be green. That makes the text a little dark, so I'll lighten it up on the dark background. And that's a green button. Now we're going to go, this is very important, to the enabled property of this button and make it false. That means when this form runs initially, this button will not be active. It will not be able to do anything when we click on it. You might be able to tell a little bit when we run it right now. Enable the green button lights up and we can press it, disable, but the green button, nothing happens on that one. It is in fact disabled. And as you learned earlier, there is no disabled property, as there was no invisible property. There was visible as false or true. Now we're going to change the label name to LBL message. And we'll put a default message inside here. The green button is not enabled, which is certainly true when this program initially runs. There it is. Now labels also can have some different border styles. Your book briefly mentioned this, but you didn't see it in any of the tutorials. If you go to border style, one of the possibilities is fixed 3D. We'll take a look at how that appears on your form when you run it. There it is. And then the one we're going to use today is fixed single. That's what it looks like here. A single pixel width going around the label with a border. Time to write some code. While we're here, let's put some documentation in indicating name, date, the name of the program, and the purpose of the program. Those are all really good things to have at the top of the code. And as I indicated earlier, we're learning how to enable and disable buttons. And we have also already taken a look at label borders. And towards the end of this, I'll show you how flat style can impact the appearance of your buttons. Right now we want to code what happens when we click on BTN Enable. I'll write a comment to indicate we want to enable the green button. Remember, it started the program disabled. So we'll say btn green.enabled equals true. We'll also update the message in the label to indicate that this has happened. Let's run it and see what it looks like. The green button is enabled, and the message was updated in the label to indicate that. Let's code how we're going to disable, or in fact, turn the enabled property false for the button. As I mentioned earlier, you learned that the visible property can be true or false. Same for enabled property. So on this disable button, we're going to make btn green.enabled equal false. Also, update the message in the label to indicate that this has happened. Let's run it and see how it appears. The green button is enabled, and now it's disabled. Well, let's put some code inside clicking on the green button as well. We'll update the message here to indicate that there was success pressing an enabled green button. We'll say, hooray for the green button! Now we can't click it, but now we can. Now it's disabled, nothing happens. But once we enable it, now we can click it. Hopefully you have a pretty good understanding of how you can enable and disable or make enabled false for buttons. Now let's check out an appearance thing we can do for our buttons. I'm going to go to Flat Style, which by default is standard, and turn it flat. Here's a quick look at what has happened so far. You can see the difference between the standard button and the flat button. The real fun happens right above Flat Style with Flat Appearance. When we click that plus sign, here are 4 things that we can affect: border color, border size, mouse down back color, and mouse over back color. I'll change the border color to fuchsia. There it is. Next is the border size in pixels. The default is 1. Here's 10, which is pretty extreme. I'll go back and change that to 2. Next, mouse down back color. This is what happens when users press down on a mouse on this button. I'll select yellow for this. And then we'll do mouse over back color. I'll pick some shade of blue for this. That's when the mouse is over the button. So there's a mouse over and a mouse down. Watch what happens. Mouse over, mouse down. These things also work if you put a background color inside the button. I'll put something kind of dark in there, and I'll have to lighten up the text, so we'll go to 4-color and change that. Same thing, mouse over, mouse down. Not required for you to use, but you might find it fun and want to add it to some of your programs.